My name is Gordon B. Pierce. I was born 10/26/22 in Benton County, Tennessee. My mother passed away when I was an infant, and I was the only child. And my grandmother and grandfather raised me for several years. And then my father and my stepmother, her husband had passed away, and they got married in, I believe, 1926.
Okay.
She had one son. He was a year and a half younger than me. I had a half brother and a half sister, which have both passed away. And I'm the oldest one of all of them. My parents worked in a textile mill all their life, and during the Great Depression, my father was laid off, and everybody was on welfare at that time. And in 1930, we moved from Humboldt, Tennessee to Trenton, Tennessee, where my father had got hired on at another textile mill. My stepmother's mother and father lived in the neighborhood.
Okay.
And they had 13 children. And so there was never any children that I couldn't play with.
Always had playmates.
Yep. And we moved on a farm about 1932 out from Trenton, Tennessee, about 3 miles out of town. And back then there were no school buses. And we had to walk to school.
The 3 miles.
And then in the wintertime, we'd walk to my grandmother's house, and she would pour out a pan of hot water to warm our feet up before we went on to school.
Wow.
And then somewhere along the line, I broke a leg, and I was laid up in a cast and with a weight on my foot for about 6 weeks. So back then they did not have a social promotion program, so I got sent back to the next grade. Had to do it over again.
Oh, wow. Do you remember the name of the school you attended?
Gibson County High School.
Gibson County High School.
And it's still there today.
Wow.
Although I don't know what to use it for, but it's still there.
Huh.
In 1936, we moved from Trenton, Tennessee to Fayette, Alabama, where my mother and father gained employment in another textile mill. And when I turned 16, I went to work there.
Wow.
And it didn't take me long to figure out that I was not going to follow their footsteps. So in the spring of 1940, I had meningitis. And I had 2 classmates that passed away for the same disease. And it was nip and tuck with me there for a while. And after I finally got over that, with the help of the county health doctor, I decided I'd join the military if I got well enough. So in October the 26th, 1940, I went to Birmingham and tried to get Marine Corps. Marine Corps turned me down because I couldn't do certain positions when firing a rifle. So I was determined to go in the military, so I went across the hall, and the Navy took me right away. No questions asked.
Wow. And how old were you?
18.
You were just 18.
So I enlisted in the Navy at the tune of $21 a day once a month.
Once a month.
And then when I went to Norfolk for boot camp, and I finished boot camp, and in December of 40, and in January of 41, they sent me to Jacksonville, Florida, to a school that make me an aircraft structural mechanic.
Wow. And how long were you in Florida?
I stayed there 4 months.
4 months.
After graduating from that school, I was sent to a squadron on board the USS Yorktown CV5.
Okay.
The Yorktown at that time had come from the west coast to the east coast, mainly to do patrol in the North Atlantic. In May of 1941,
Okay.
I was aboard the Yorktown. We were patrolling the North Atlantic for German submarines. We were armed.
Mm-hmm.
The planes were armed to drop depth charges on the submarines if they found it. And actually we were in World War II before it was ever declared. Our main objective there was escorting convoys over to England.
Okay.
And we would escort them halfway across the Atlantic. The English would pick them up, pick up the convoy, and escort them the rest of the way, and we would come back, and we were operating out of Argentia, Newfoundland, and Portland, Maine.
Okay.
And at that time, Newfoundland wasn't nothing there.
Mm-hmm.
So the only time I ever been seasick was when I rode the Liberty launch from the landing back out to the ship in a storm. And I saw sailors that had 15, 20 years in upchuck.
Oh. Oh. Wow.
So when we left Argentia, headed south, back to Norfolk, we run into a hurricane.
Oh, wow.
The hurricane put in a pretty good sized crack from the superstructure down. So when we got into Norfolk, the ship went into the dry dock for upgrade and repair of the superstructure.
So what did you do during that time?
I was still in the squadron, and we were based at the Naval Air Station, Norfolk.
Okay.
We were in training process.
Oh,
Everybody was training.
okay. So tell me what life was like on an aircraft carrier. What did you like most about it?
Well, there wasn't nothing you really liked about it.
Okay.
But when I first went aboard, I didn't have a bunk. I had to sleep in a hammock.
Oh, wow.
So you had 6 or 7 guys lined up in a row, all in hammocks, and some more on the other side of you. And this was on the mess deck. So they had to take the hammocks down and stow them so they could get ready for the morning meal.
Wow.
And this was day in and day out.
Wow.
So somewhere along the line, I finally got a bunk. 3 tier bunk.
So what did you least like about life on the aircraft carrier?
Well, as old saying goes, if it moves, salute it. If it don't, paint it. I done my share of mess cooking, which is KP to anybody in the Army,
Right.
and everybody had to do it. 3 months of it.
Oh, wow.
And the one time I was mess cooking, and I got a break, so I went up on the flight deck. And the end of the flight deck, the catwalk alongside the flight deck, was some Marines back there setting up to fire at some balloons. And I went back there and was watching them. And I thought to myself, well, I'd do that. So I got down there and I got in that line. And I'd watched them long enough to know how to fire that machine gun. I got back there and I fired that machine gun out of burst of a balloon. And which is probably off out there about 50 yards. So the officer in charge of them Marines, he looked at me and he says, "Who are you?" And I give him my name and what I done. He says, "You better get your ass back down below." Well, this Marine was General Earl Anderson.
Oh.
General Earl Anderson was the youngest Marine that ever attained a 4-star rank in the Marine Corps.
Wow.
Today he's 92 years old.
Wow.
And still going strong.
Still going strong. So when did you leave Norfolk then?
We left Norfolk probably around the 15th or 20th of December, going to the West Coast.
Okay.
And we went through the Panama Canal, and we docked at the Panama Canal. I believe that was Christmas.
Wow.
And there we made a little old raid on some islands out there that the Japanese had took over in the Central Pacific. And then we went back to San Diego. And we were in San Diego over New Year's of 1942.
Okay.
And we left San Diego in probably the central part of January, going to the South Pacific by way of Pearl Harbor.
Oh.
And at Pearl we took on ammunition and everything and refueled and headed to the South Pacific. We went down to the South Pacific. In the meantime, we raided some little old islands down there that the Japanese had took over on the way down. The Yorktown and the Enterprise operating together. And so on the May the 4th, 1942, the Battle of Coral Sea. The Battle of Coral Sea, we took 2 bomb hits, and so that put us out of action. The Lexington was sunk, and so we went into a little old island down there called Tonga, in the Tonga Taboo, which is in the Tonga group. The Queen confiscated all the girls and took them back up in the hills. They didn't want nothing to do with them sailors.
Wow.
Well, we was only in there about 2 days, and long enough to patch the ship up to get us back to Pearl Harbor. I never did get ashore.
Oh, okay.
And but we went back to Pearl Harbor. We got to Pearl. We'd been at sea 104 days.
Wow.
We were down to beans and rice, and we'd run out of coffee, run out of tea. We still had the capability of making fresh water.
Wow.
So, and we got to Pearl, immediately went into dry dock to patch the ship up before we could get back out. And all these shipboard construction people come aboard, and you couldn't sleep. They was making so much noise. And we were glad to get out of there and get back out to where we could get a little sleep. And that was my first taste of fresh pineapple juice.
Oh.
They had a little stand set up down on the dock, and you could get fresh pineapple juice there. The Navy had took over the Royal Hawaiian Hotel out at Waikiki Beach, and they was giving each man a chance to go out there and spend one night.
Okay.
And so I had my chance, and I spent one night at the Royal Hawaiian, and they fed us and everything like that, and put on a show and all of that.
Wow.
So the next day we were back on board ship, and 4 or 5 days later we were underway again.
Oh, wow. So you were there.
Going out to the Battle of Midway.
Okay.
Of course, we didn't know this at the time.
Yeah.
And so soon as we cleared the harbor at Pearl Harbor, we started taking on planes. And fighters and bombers and all of that, the whole air group. I remember one incident where a fighter come in, and at that time it was just a straight deck flight deck, and they had barriers to stop the planes if they missed the hook. One fighter went over the barrier, landed on top of another that had just landed, and the prop was spinning over in the cockpit and killed the pilot.
Oh, wow.
Well, I don't know what ever happened to the pilot that was flying the fighter. His name was, I do remember his name, he was Lieutenant Commander Lovelace. And I was standing in the catwalk watching it when it happened. And take a break.
Yeah. So let's back up. When you were at Pearl Harbor, they had just been attacked.
Right.
So what did you see there when you were?
Ships that had been damaged, turned upside down. A lot of debris, a lot of oil on the water. And fortunately they missed the dry docks. And all this destruction was the battleships and the cruisers that was tied up at Fort Island. Fort Island was a naval air station.
Okay.
And they had a lot of destruction there.
Were people still kind of in shock over what had happened,
Well,
or had they had enough time?
I didn't get to see many people.
Yeah.
The other than the civilians I come in contact with there on the base, the submarine base, as I recall, was not damaged. All the damage was to the battleships and cruisers.
So you all took off and you were headed out to...
Out to the Battle of Midway.
Yeah. And when did that happen, and what kind of led up to that?
Battle of Midway went on from the 4th of June to the 7th of June. And the United States Navy sunk 4 Japanese carriers in the Battle of Midway. And that was what they call the turning point of the war in the Pacific. The ship was hit with bombs and torpedoes. The torpedoes is what done us in. I was manning a machine gun. I saw the 2 torpedoes that hit the ship right under me. I ended up on the flight deck in a daze, and when I got my senses about me, they had announced abandoned ship. Well, I took a look down at the low side and saw all this oil, and I decided I didn't want no part of that. So I climbed up the flight deck to the starboard side and walked down the side of the ship into the water with the help of a line. At that time, the lines all had knots in them where you could go down pretty easy. And I was in the water probably 4 to 5 hours, maybe longer. And the Navy had taught you how to use your dungarees as a life raft, a life jacket. You tie a knot in each leg, catch it full of air, and you can get up in it and float. And although I had a life jacket, I soon ditched it and gave it to somebody that needed it worse than I did. And just at dark, a destroyer come along and picked us up. And that was the USS Russell.
What day of the battle was this?
This was on June the 4th.
Oh, so right at the beginning.
Yeah.
You got hit. Wow.
And the captain of the ship, Captain Buckmaster, asked for volunteers to go back aboard for salvage work. Well, there was a whole bunch of them volunteered, the ones that was qualified. And they got the ship in a level position and was in tow. And a Japanese submarine snuck in there and blasted the tow ship and the Yorktown, and that was the end of it.
So it sank again, essentially,
Yeah.
kind of. I mean...
And so the Yorktown went down in 17,000 feet of water, and it's still sitting there upright. And
Wow.
the Ballard discovered it, and National Geographic published pictures of it.
Wow.
And then we transferred from the Russell to the USS Fulton, and from the Fulton they took us into back to Pearl Harbor. And they had issued us some dungarees and something like that, some clothing. We got to Pearl Harbor. They loaded us all in trucks and took us out to what we call a concentration camp. And they had one gate in and one gate out. And they had Marines on them gates. And they did not want anybody out of there to let the Japs know that they had sunk the Yorktown.
Really?
So we stayed there 2 weeks.
Wow.
And from there I went aboard the USS Saratoga CV5. And I was in a squadron at that time, and a dive bombing squadron. About the only thing we done was sit around and play poker for a month. And so we come back into Pearl, and we offloaded. And the next thing I know, about a week later, we were aboard the Enterprise, CV6, headed down to Guadalcanal. Well, we were down there in August of '42. No. Put the Marines in Guadalcanal.
Wow.
While we're there, 300 miles east of Guadalcanal, the Battle of Santa Cruz. At that time, the two carriers was the Hornet and the Enterprise. The Hornet was sunk, and the Enterprise was badly damaged. So back to Pearl we go. And at that time, the Battle of Santa Cruz, the United States did not have the first carrier in the South Pacific. So we get back to Pearl, and the squadron offloaded, and we went to a Naval Air Station, Kaneohe. And then we were there several months. Well, they were waiting for the the Enterprise to be repaired. March of '43, the squadron commander called me in, and he says, "I see where you've been around all this action. You hadn't had no leave yet. Back home." He says, "Well, I'm going to see what I can do." Well, come along about April, he says, "We're going to send you to school." So he sent me to school up at Grumman Aircraft Factory for 45 days. Oh, no, 45 days leave when I got to San Francisco.
Wow.
And so I caught a train home, and that's the first time I'd been home since I joined the Navy.
Wow. Wow.
And so I went to that school, and I don't know what I was supposed to be doing, and they didn't either. So they put me up in a hotel, fed me, and all of that. So I went, me and another guy, we decided, he was there, and he didn't know what he was doing there either. And so we talked the officer in charge, and he says, well, why don't y'all take off for a couple of 3 days? So we went down to USO at on Broadway down there, and you could get tickets for shows, you get meal tickets, you could get tickets for anything, hotel rooms. So he and I, we decided we'd have a few drinks and go see the Rockettes. We went to see the Rockettes. We had front row seat.
Wow.
And here's these two sailors down there, and both of us went to sleep watching the Rockettes. we finished up at school in probably about June or July. And transferred back to the Pacific, back to the squadron. At that time, you had to ride a train. But it was a good train. You had a Pullman, and they fed you and everything. But had to catch a train over Newark, New Jersey, instead of Central Station. And we had a sort of a stateroom, and the conductor come by and wanted to know if we was okay, and I said, yeah, except we don't have anything to drink. So me and this other sailor, that's all they were. He says, well, I see what I can do. So after a while, here come a porter with a little old cooler, had a case of beer in it, and a fifth of whiskey. So we had us a few, and next day we got to Chicago, and he wouldn't let us take any of this off of the train with us. You went into one station and you left at another one. So we had to take a taxi from this one to that one. And so we got over to the other station and got on a train headed to Oakland, California. And that time they had them old steam engines and all puffing smoke and everything. And at least we had a bunk to sleep in. But we made it into San Francisco, Oakland, California. Would you believe that trains do not go into San Francisco from the East Coast?
I wouldn't.
And so it put us out there in the old barracks, that had been converted from the World's Fair at Treasure Island. And big barracks, I mean huge. So me and this other guy, we didn't have nothing to do. So we go over to we're at Railroad Express and see about getting a job. So they hired us.
While you're still in the Navy?
Yeah. So every night we would go in and pick up a truck, go over to Oakland and meet the train, load it up, and bring it back to San Francisco. And that's how they done it. And they paid us every night. And so this just happened probably 4 hours. And so that's how we got our Liberty money.
And where was the commander while you were doing this? Was there somebody supervising the
Uh,
barracks?
They had a captain over the whole bunch.
Ah.
It was different groups going different places.
Okay.
And when I left there, I think there's probably 18 or 20 of us headed back down to the South Pacific.
Mm-hmm.
They put us on an old Liberty ship. And my duties on there was to read the news of the day to all the troops every morning. They'd come on teletype or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't no sleeping down below or nothing like that. They had tarpaulins over the deck covers, and that's where the bunks was at,
Right up on deck.
right up on deck.
Wow.
So one night we were headed back down in the South Pacific, and I believe the most scary time that I had was we run up on a task force down there. We had no escort, just us. And they sounded general quarters. Well, we didn't have no general quarters station to go to, except stand by and jump over the side. And so what happened was this task force had sent a message over. They had spotted us, sent a message over, says, do not stop, do not attempt to scuttle, and stand by for a boarding party. Well, really what happened was the radioman was a day behind on his communications.
Mm-hmm.
Every time you changed days, you changed the code word. Well, he didn't change the code word. Well, they put a spotlight on us, a searchlight, and so we were just waiting to see what was going to happen. We didn't know who it was.
Wow.
Well, they finally, enough communications got it straightened out, and we got underway again. And I went down to Espiritu Santos. That's where, that was a staging area south of Guadalcanal for all the ships and troops and everything.
Okay.
They transferred us off to a LST,
Which is?
Still Hunting Squadron.
Okay.
LST finally got underway with the help of they pulled the anchor up and there was a Jeep hanging on it. Yeah, a World War II Jeep was hanging on that anchor that had fell over the side somewhere or another. Anyway, we got underway and we went up to a little old island just kind of north of Guadalcanal. The Seabees had built a landing strip there, and that's where the squadron was at. They offloaded us there, and we reported into the CO and all of that. And got a tent set up and a foxhole dug. And we made us a pretty fancy foxhole. It holds 6 people. And we put coconut tree logs across the top of it. So that was my first experience with a night bombing. The Japs would come over every night, drop bombs, and then it slacked off, and they got where just one would come over.
Just one bomber.
Just one bomber. He was just harassing us. And they had a bomb at that time. They called them daisy cutters. They exploded right 3 or 4 yards above ground. Put shrapnel out.
Wow.
One night, you could hear them coming. Twin-engine bomber, not synchronized engines. Whoa, 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 whoa. The Army had set up some anti-aircraft batteries, and they never could hit one of these things. So this night, they put the searchlight on him, and the Army fired one shell. And that was the end of Washing Machine Charlie.
They got him, huh?
They had what they call a proximity fuse. It didn't have to hit the airplane, just had to get close to it. And Washing Machine Charlie didn't bother us anymore.
Wow. And were you all trying to just hold that island, or were you trying
No,
to
we wasn't trying to
capture?
hold it. We'd already had it.
You already had it
Yeah.
at that point.
Yeah.
Okay.
The Seabees had come in there and built us an airstrip,
Oh, okay.
and that's what we were operating from.
Gotcha.
And one incident we had an old plane there that was all beat up and everything. So they assigned this enlisted pilot, lowest man on the totem pole, to fly this thing down to Espiritu Santos and confiscate another one. And he took this thing down there, taxied up where the others was at, hung around overnight. Next day he went out there and got in a brand new airplane that flew it back to us. He stole it.
So he left the other one.
Yeah, left the old one down there. He stole it.
Did he get in trouble?
No,
No.
nobody never bothered to check on something like that.
Wow.
So as the Seabees finished landing strips, we would move.
Oh.
And we moved, went from Russell to Bougainville, Villa La Villa. And we was there a few months, probably 3. And then we moved up to another little island. These islands kept getting smaller. And we was there probably 3 months, and we moved up to another one, and it was even smaller than that one. The landing strip started on one side of the island and ended up on the other.
Wow. That's small.
And so all these little islands were nothing but coral. We dug us a foxhole and everything. And luckily we had to use it. One night, heard this noise coming through the jungle. We thought it was a Japanese tank or something or other. They'd done made another landing. So we all got in the foxhole and pulled out our weapons and getting ready to repel invaders. And this thing kept coming, tearing things up. And he got to our tent and he tore that up, and it was a Commando Dragon. You know them big old dragons that they have out there in Indonesia? And this thing's huge. They're huge. and he just having himself a ball walking through there, his tail swinging and tearing everything up. So,
Wow.
anyway, come daylight, we set things back up again. And the next day, there was a Japanese bomber come over the bluff, right over the mess hall, and went down, and the Army Air Force had some bombers lined up down there, and he went down there and hit the first one and got every one of them. That one plane, treetop level, Army Air Corps planes.
Wow.
He didn't get any of ours,
Huh.
because we had ours all dispersed, but they had them lined up nice and neat, like they're standing
Easy to
at
hit.
attention.
Oh, wow.
But we worked on everybody's airplanes. It didn't matter who it was. We worked on them. This is 44.
4. Okay.
Went down there in July of 43.
Okay.
And we left probably in July of 44. And so, commanding officer called us together one morning. He said, "Well, we're going home." We all looked at him and said, "Well, you got to be kidding." Next morning, a transport showed up out there on the bay. And he told us, he says, "Leave all your tools. Don't bring nothing but your personal gear. Leave everything, your bunks, your cots, all of it. Don't even bring your weapons." So I left 6 hand grenades, a 45 caliber revolver, a 22 caliber automatic pistol, M16 rifle, left it all laying on the bunk.
And why'd they do that?
Well, we're coming home.
Because you're coming home, but
Yeah.
were other people
Yeah,
going to be
other
coming
people was coming in.
in? Okay. Swapping you out.
And, another incident while we was on this island. We first got there, they had us dispersed off out in the coconut groves. And we had the hammocks strung between the trees and had they called them jungle hammocks. They had a canopy over them to keep the rain off of you, and had a mosquito net around it. One night we were laying there and heard this noise coming through the jungle, and so we all rolled out, manned our weapons, and this noise kept getting closer and closer. After a while, somebody started firing, and we all fired. Come daylight, we'd killed 3 hogs, wild hogs. So we had a big barbecue.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. That's interesting.
But anyhow, we all loaded aboard this transport. And when I went down there, I weighed 210 pounds. When I left, I weighed 160.
Wow.
You did not survive on K rations and C rations.
Yeah.
So when I got aboard this transport, I thought, now where's the best place to work? The mess hall. So I volunteered to work in the mess hall. Eat good.
Wow.
So we got into San Francisco, and they transferred us down to Moffett Field. That's down in Sunnyvale, California. And got a physical and everything else. He says, "Okay, y'all do as you please for about 2 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
Said you can't go home yet. We got to process you. So we fooled around there and visited everybody and made shows up in San Francisco, and I had friends that was there from Fayette. And it's a wonder hadn't they got locked up. They had a little girl, she's 12 years old, and so she and I'd catch a bus and we'd go to San Francisco to see a movie. Well, nowadays you get locked up for such.
That's true.
Sure would.
Yeah, that's true.
But anyway, she and I would go into a movie and everything. And I stayed in touch with them a long time after she had grown up and got married.
Yeah.
But anyhow, after a couple of weeks there hanging around the area, they give us all leave. Well, I went home. 30 days. And at that time, all gasoline was rationed. Everything was rationed.
Mm-hmm.
And the sheriff come out. He says, "You need the gas ration tickets, coupons?" I said, "Yeah, I do." He says, "Well, let me know. And when you need some more, you give me a handful. Let me know if you need any more." So I had borrowed somebody's car and I visited everybody. And so I got on the train back to San Francisco, Santa Rosa, north of San Francisco. That's where the squadron was at. Long train ride.
That's a long ride.
And finally got to Santa Rosa and got set up in the barracks and everything. So when it was getting ready to, I guess about 8 months I was there. Getting ready to deploy again. I went up for a flight physical and couldn't pass it. So they sent me down to Oakland for a checkup, and they found out I had some heart problems. At that time they called it battle fatigue. So went back up to the squadron, and they had, in the meantime, had me orders to the University of Oklahoma, Norman, Oklahoma. Shipped everything to Norman. Got my orders and everything. And before I could catch a train, they canceled it. Here all my stuff headed to Norman. Went down to Railway Express. They got a hold of somebody. Got it back to me the next day. So in the meantime, I'd bought a car. No. Yeah, I had bought a car. Sure, I wasn't going to ride. I was going to drive. 36 Buick. 4-door sedan. Anyway, they canceled the orders. And got all my stuff back. They says, a couple of days later I got some more orders. I said, now we're going to send you to Fort Lauderdale, Florida to be a gunnery instructor for the duration. Said you've had enough.
Wow.
So I drove all the way across the country. Me and another guy. And checked in down at Fort Lauderdale and was teaching these guys how to man a machine gun and all of that. Having a good time down there. Got to see some good football games down at the Orange Bowl. And first hurricane I ever been through.
Oh, while you were there.
And of all things, they took us out and put us up in a hurricane-proof hotel on the beach. Set up a mess hall and everything out there.
Wow.
Hurricane came through, we went back to the barracks.
So where were you when the war ended? Do you remember?
I was at Fort Lauderdale.
So you were there?
In a movie house.
At the theater.
Yeah, they put it up on the screen.
Really?
Yeah. At that time, there was nothing going on in Florida in the summertime. The tourists had not taken over. They had boarded up everything just about. And I lived on base in the housing, and housing cost me $34.50 a month. That included all utilities.
Wow. Did you all realize the significance of what was happening during the war?
Oh yeah,
You
yeah. I think we all realized it. Going back to several episodes, that I know one time when the squadron was in Norfolk, and we had to go to general quarters, and why I don't know, but they had. Anyway, we ran from the barracks down to where the planes were at. The planes was unarmed, and I don't know what they was going to plan on doing with them. But they cranked them up and had them warmed up for the pilots and all. And that was one incident. Another incident was when I finished boot camp in Norfolk in December of 1940. You go down to the PX. Of course, I didn't drink at that time, but you get a beer for a nickel. And come along December the 7th when the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor on Sunday. I had just gotten back from a noon meal and was listening to a football game on somebody's radio. And when they announced that, another incident that I remember was trying to catch up with the Yorktown when she come from the west coast to the east coast. They put us on this transport or some kind of a vessel. We went out to Bermuda thinking that the Yorktown was there, but it wasn't. And so they carried us back to Norfolk and kicked us off. And another incident I remember was we was in San Diego on New Year's Eve, and we closed the bar at midnight. Had to go back to the ship. All of us was like so, and then when the squadron was at Kaneohe, a friend of mine, he had bought an old motorcycle off of somebody, and I was riding on the back of it with him, and we went out to the beach, and he gunned the motorcycle, and I fell off the back and in the sand. And while we were at Kaneohe, also, the squadron was getting ready to leave. There was 2 cars in that squadron, a 37 Ford convertible and a 35 Ford coupe with a rumble seat. One of my friends bought the convertible. I bought the 35 Ford with a rumble seat for $25. I couldn't drive, didn't know how to drive. So I got out there and I practiced with this thing. And one day I announced to him, I said, well, I'm going to Waikiki to get a drink. Anybody want to go? Wouldn't nobody ride with me. Well, at that time, to get from Kaneohe over to Waikiki, there wasn't but 2 ways. You could take the long way around the beach road, or you could go over the Old Pally Road. The Old Pally Road was something else. It was up one side of the mountain and down the other. And they had switchback curves. Some of them you had to back up to get around.
Wow.
That's where I learned to drive, on that road.
Wow.
And so, one time, me and another guy, Johnny Martin, he's going down to Pearl City Tavern. That's down on Pearl Harbor, down there. And I was driving this old 35 Ford, and at the time the local police had been supplemented with Army MPs. So this Army MP, he on a motorcycle stopped me. Wanted to see my driver's license. I says, what's that? So he says, okay, is your buddy over there got a driver's license? And Johnny had a driver's license. He says, well, let him drive. So I went down to, next day or two, I went down to the police headquarters, and they wrote me out a license. Just wrote the thing out and signed it. And I signed my name on it.
And that was it.
And I kept those. That was the only driver's license I ever had till it was stolen from me in 1958.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
I stole my wallet and all. There went my driver's license.
You lost it.
Then I had to get an Alabama driver's license. But anyhow.
At Midway, when the ship went down, did a lot of sailors lose their lives in that battle?
We really didn't have that many casualties.
You didn't?
Not from. Now there was some casualties from the bombs and the torpedoes and everything like that.
Right.
But as far as anybody drowning, they never did say.
They had. Oh,
I don't think so. I think most of them got off safely when they had already been killed. Except for the ship, the destroyer that was towing the Yorktown, it got torpedoed. They lost a bunch.
Yeah. Did you dream about the war after it was over? Did you ever have dreams about being back on the island?
Yeah, I had an episode when I was in Santa Rosa, California. And I remember one time I was at a football game, And I had an episode there, and the police took me to the hospital.
Mm-hmm.
And that was about the only time.
Mm-hmm.
That's when they decided I'd had enough.
Had enough, yeah.
But anyhow, where were we?
Well, the war's over, so.
Oh yeah.
You.
Yeah. So I went to. I stayed at Fort Lauderdale another year,
Okay.
and they was closing that place. And I went up to Jacksonville, and they sent me home. I had they paid me for X number of days, something like about I think I had 108 days of leave on books. They paid me for that, and then they give me 3 months leave.
Wow.
With pay. And every month I'd get a check. So, and I went in the reserves. I stayed in the reserves till 1949.
Okay.
In 49, I went to they called me back to active duty, and in 49 I went to Chincoteague, Virginia, Naval Aviation Ordnance Test Station. And that was when I first got into drones, and all of it experimental. And
were they gearing up for Korea at that point?
Huh?
Or were they gearing up for Korea at
No,
that
not
point?
really.
Not really?
No,
Okay.
no. They was all of it was. They was experimenting with napalm, aerial torpedoes, drones, and we had various types of aircraft. And the drones at that time was model airplanes. Of course, they were more rugged built than what you'd build at home.
Sure.
In 1951, they sent me to school in Memphis. And I finished up, I believe, in 52.
What kind of school was it?
It was just an advanced school.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Page 1, chapter 2. In 1952, I joined a squadron at San Diego, California. We was mostly doing experimental drone work.
Okay.
After 4 months there, I joined a unit in Miho, Japan. Miho was an old Japanese Air Force base that the U.S. Air Force had taken over. There was 16 of us. And we were the closest point between Japan and South Korea. we would take these drones, which were old World War II F-6F fighters, and fly them out to the aircraft carriers, mainly the Boxer, and from there they would load these planes up with ammunition, bombs, and so forth, and catapult them off, and the chase plane would come along and pick them up. And the chase plane had a television camera and a pod under the wing with a little screen in the cockpit for the pilot to follow the drone. They would fly these old F-6F fighters over North Korea and fly the whole airplane into the dams and blow up the dams up there in North Korea. And so we were constantly getting more airplanes. And I was there a year, in and out of Japan and Korea.
And was the war, so the war was going on at this point, correct?
Yeah, that's during the
Korean War?
Korean War.
Okay.
After I finished that duty of 1 year, I went back to the main squadron in San Diego. And immediately was transferred to Alamogordo Air Force Base, where we had a detachment of drones out there. Mainly, we were working with the Air Force to control the B-17 bomber as a drone.
Oh.
After 2 months there, I transferred back to the squadron in San Diego. And in 1955, I was transferred to Berrien Field at Foley, Alabama.
Okay.
So I spent 2 years at Foley as a maintenance chief for the squadron. And then 2 years is up, the Navy's going to transfer you back to sea.
Oh.
And so I went, they sent me to school first, and up at Memphis. And then I went to a squadron at Sanford, Florida, heavy attack squadron. And we operated on the FDR, the Forrestal, and the Saratoga.
Okay.
The in 58, the squadron deployed to the Mid, supposedly for 6 months, aboard the FDR CV-42. After 9 months, we finally got back home. And the squadron, I was, the squad, the squadron was being transitioned into something else. So I transferred to heavy attack squadron 5 at Sanford. Sanford had 6 squadrons of heavy attack aircraft down there.
Wow.
These were a takeoff for the Air Force B-66. So I was the maintenance chief for that squadron. And in '59, I made another med cruise aboard the USS Forrestal, which was a CV-59. That was supposed to last 6 months. It lasted 9.
They're not very good at estimating time, are they?
At that time, the conflict was going on over in Lebanon, and we were mostly standing by over there in the mid to give somebody some support.
Okay.
We made port calls at Beirut, Athens, Corfu, Greece, Rhodes, Greece, Spit, Yugoslavia, Naples, Taranto, Gulf One in France, Nice, France, Cannes, France, Barcelona, Spain, and some of the islands in the Med. One time I had put in for recruiting duty, and lo and behold, I got it. So the ship was in Naples, and I transferred off the ship waiting transportation back to the States. And the security officer at the Naval Air Facility there in Naples, he and I had done duty in Japan and at Foley, and so he invited me and another chief to his place for a party. Well, we partied, and at midnight that night, they drug us onto the airplane. And bag and baggage. And they flew us to Morocco. And while I was in Morocco, I had the chance to visit Gibraltar and Rabat, Casablanca, and finally got a flight out of there to Norfolk, and from Norfolk I caught a plane home. And then I went back I drove up to Bainbridge, Maryland for a recruiter school. I was up there 2 months, and then they transferred me to Birmingham, and from there to Montgomery. And Montgomery is where I spent 2 years. And that's when I saw the handwriting on the wall. The Vietnam situation was going on. I did not want to go out to Vietnam on another ship or a squadron. And they offered me a commission, and I refused it on account of that reason. I put in my papers to retire. Well, they sent me down to Pensacola for retirement. Well, the Navy won't let you out unless they put you back in the same shape you came in. So they immediately put me in the hospital for 6 months.
Oh.
So while I was in the hospital, in and out, I built a beach house at Gulf Shores on Navy time.
While you were in the hospital.
Yeah.
Were they treating, was it your heart condition?
No, my knees.
Your knees.
Yeah, finally they decided they couldn't do nothing about it. And after 6 months, they put me out on 30% disability.
Wow.
Had to go up to Charleston for the evaluation, medical board up there. And then they sent me back home. And let's see, April of '63, they put me out on the medical.
Okay.
But I still stayed in the reserves. And I'd been out about a year, and I got orders to report to Jacksonville. I thought, man alive, here I am on disability, and I'm getting these orders to Jacksonville. So I immediately got on the phone and finally got through to somebody, and a few days later I got information that to cancel them orders. So when I got out, I had a job waiting with a contractor, doing the same thing that I was doing in the Navy. I went to work with Land Air at Brooklyn Air Force Base. We were modifying F-105s for the Air Force. And after the contract was up, the next day I transferred into civil service, doing the same thing. So when they closed Brooklyn Field, I transferred to Pensacola. Well, lo and behold, I got over to Pensacola, and here they had people that had been working in there, a temporary status for 10 years. And they hadn't advanced to nothing. So some of us got our heads together and said, okay, let's unionize this thing. And we did. We had a vote, and it carried. So we became affiliated with the AFGE, American Federation of Government Employees. Immediately got these people higher wages, higher classification, and it was all for the good. I'm not a die-hard union fan, but we done some good there. And in 1978, I believe it was, I retired from civil service. And I went to work for Joel Clark in Bay Minette on his airplanes out there. And then I went to work after that, I went to work for Roar at the airport in Fairhope. And in '86, I had a quadruple bypass, and in the spring or summer. And in October, when I turned 65, I decided I'd just retire.
Yeah.
And I put in for Social Security and all that sort of stuff and retired from there. End the story.
Well, I wanted to
Well,
ask,
in the meantime, I married Danny's mama.
Yeah, don't forget about that little detail.
Yeah, in 1980.
Somewhere along the line there.
Pick me up.
A great move.
How'd you like being a recruiter?
It was good.
Was it?
Yeah, I covered 9 counties.
Oh, so you
Right through
traveled
the-
a lot.
Right, yeah, every day. Right through the middle of Alabama. Auburn, Troy, Tuskegee, and go all the way up to Alexander City, down to Andalusia. And all that time, I got 1 ticket.
Well, that's a pretty good record.
Yeah, I was coming back from Auburn one night. I'd been over there to give a lecture, and some slowpoke up in front of me, doing about 30 miles an hour, and so I went around him. Well, as soon as I got around him, there was a policeman right in the head of him.
Mm-hmm.
So I had to pass both of them. I went on up there and parked, and here he come.
So you just waited.
Yeah. And the policeman was holding up the other car.
Wow.
But anyway, we got that settled. And I put some good people in the Navy.
Yeah.
I didn't fool with jailbirds and nothing else. And
mostly went to schools, I assume.
yeah. High schools, we
Yeah.
made talks and on television, and I was the only one up there that didn't have a wife with me.
Okay.
And so I caught all the extra duties at night and on the weekends and everything like that.
So since retirement, talk just a minute about you've gone to reunions
Oh yeah,
and
yeah. And I don't know what year it was, but I found out that the USS Yorktown CV5 was holding an annual reunion. So I immediately contacted the necessary people, and they sent me all the information and everything. And I believe the first reunion we attended was Annapolis, Maryland.
Yeah.
And then I missed a few since then. I went to 2 in Solvang, California, San Antonio, Austin, Saratoga, New York, but all these ships I've been on, they all
Michigan.
they all got organized and reunions and everything, and we went to one in Charleston. Got to go aboard the USS Yorktown CV5, and that was a great adventure. They've done a wonderful job there.
so what was the most recent reunion you attended?
Austin, Texas.
In Austin. And when
Yeah.
was that? What year?
That was last year.
Last
This-
year.
Oh, this year.
This year.
Okay.
This year.
So 2012.
Yeah.
And how many showed up?
Well, what was it, 9?
6.
6.
6.
Plus all the families.
Yeah, 6. Last year in Lexington, Kentucky, 4.
Oh. Wow.
And the ones that was in Austin this year, they all of them in bad shape, just like myself.
Wow.
But my old friend, General Earl Anderson, which was at one time was the youngest 4-star general in the Marine Corps, still living up in Washington.
With the Jags.
Yeah, he's with the Judge Advocate General's office.
Uh-huh.
And the old friend up in Athens, Georgia, Captain John Hancock.
Well, all the more reason to document your story.
And-
Because, you know, some of us weren't around for all those significant events.
Yeah, I figured up one time, I think I spent 12 years at sea,
Wow.
or overseas.